Okay, let's unpack this. For anyone out there who thinks prophecy is, I don't know, vague, abstract, maybe purely
Right,
spiritual.
they're just ideas.
Exactly. Today's deep dive is really going to challenge every one of those assumptions.
Yeah.
We are opening up a blueprint for the future that is just staggering in its specificity.
Oh, absolutely. The scale is immense. It's a huge shift in the narrative of Ezekiel.
A seismic shift.
Yeah. I mean, the first 35 chapters were so dominated by these terrifying pronouncements of judgment, right? The destruction of Jerusalem, the exile, the condemnation of other nations.
It's pretty bleak.
It is. But then right at chapter 36, the focus just pivots. It turns completely toward hope, total national restoration, and, the absolute unconditional fulfillment of God's ancient promises to Israel.
So our mission today isn't just to give a summary of these prophecies. It's to actually map out this future in the same kind of high-resolution detail that the prophet himself was given.
That's the key, high resolution.
We're dealing with a text that lays out the complete physical, spiritual, and geographical restoration of Israel. It details a massive end times military conflict.
And then it provides these stunningly precise architectural drawings. I mean, 9 chapters of blueprints.
9 chapters for a future temple complex and a landscape that's just, radically transformed by divine intervention.
So the sources we're looking at for this deep dive give us a really clear 4-part structure to follow. First, the foundation, the spiritual and physical restoration.
Okay.
Second, this massive global conflict that happens right before the final stage. Third, the detailed vision of the future sanctuary itself.
The blueprints.
The blueprints. And finally, the new organization of the land and the holy city.
And for you, the listener, this is what's so incredible. This is a high-resolution map of a promised future. It's not just abstract theology.
Not at all.
It's filled with surprising, concrete facts. I mean, from the geometry of a central sacred district that spans for miles to the precise duration of a post-war cleanup effort.
Which takes 7 full years.
7 years. The level of commitment to physical detail here is really what makes this material so compelling.
And that very specificity, I think, it confirms the certainty of the promise. These are not meant to be, flexible spiritual allegories. These are concrete, geographical, and architectural commitments. They assure the listener that the covenant God made with Abraham about the land and the people will find a literal fulfillment.
So let's start this journey in chapter 36. And it opens by addressing the land itself. Almost like the mountains and the hills are characters in this drama.
They really are.
The prophecy starts with a direct address to the mountains of Israel. It sounds almost like a poem about the geography, promising that these mountains, which have seen so much war and defilement, will now start to bear fruit because the people will arrive soon.
And that direct address to the literal landscape is, it's a fascinating literary and theological device. It's a very deliberate, very powerful contrast to the awful fate that was just pronounced on Israel's neighbor, Edom, in the chapter right before this.
In chapter 34.
Exactly. Edom had shown this intense hatred for Israel, and they were specifically rejoicing that the ancient heights, the mountains, had become their easy prey, their property.
So the land itself was being insulted, defamed?
Yes. The text says it had been subjected to the nation's insults, becoming prey and the subject of gossip and slander.
So it wasn't just desolate, it was spiritually mocked by Israel's enemies. So God's promise to the mountains, then, is a complete reversal of that curse.
It is. God is basically saying, I have spoken in my zeal and my anger against the nations, especially Edom, who possessed my land with great joy and utter contempt. And now, you, the mountains, you will be cultivated, you'll be planted.
And then there's that crucial line, I will do more good for Israel than at the beginning of their history.
That phrase is so critical. More good for you than at the beginning of your history. This isn't just about restoring the former glory of, say, Solomon's time. It's a promise of ultimate, unparalleled, and sustained blessing. This physical restoration, the promise that people and animals will multiply on these mountains, it's the foundational geographical requirement for all the new covenant promises that come next.
Okay, that sets the stage for the physical return. But the text immediately turns to this uncomfortable reason they were scattered in the first place. It forces them to own their past.
Oh, it's blunt and very severe. Ezekiel states clearly that the Israelites defiled the land by their behavior and their deeds.
And the language is so vivid.
It's highly ritualistic language. It describes their behavior as being like the uncleanness of a woman having her monthly period, which is a direct reference to the purity laws in Leviticus 15.
So that kind of ritual uncleanness, it spread like a contagion, defiling everything.
Yeah.
And that's what necessitated their removal from the Holy Land.
Precisely. And the core sins that are listed are bloodshed, violence and murder, and critically, idolatry.
So they violated the terms of the Old Covenant, and God judged them by scattering them among the nations. But here is the massive pivot point of chapter 36, and it's so often misunderstood. If Israel was scattered because of their own grievous sin, why is the primary reason for their return all about God's reputation?
That is the essential insight of this entire section. The Lord explicitly states, and he repeats this multiple times to make sure there's absolutely no confusion, "It is not for your sake that I am about to act, but for the sake of my holy reputation."
So it's not based on their merit at all?
Not at all. It emphasizes that the restoration is an unconditional, sovereign act driven by a divine necessity, not by any human worthiness.
It's like a divine reputational crisis then. Their dispersion among the nations actually created a credibility problem for Yahweh.
I mean, think about it. When the Israelites were scattered, the Gentiles looked at them and drew a really damaging conclusion. These are the people of the Lord, yet they have departed from his land.
The implication being their God was too weak to protect them.
Or too faithless to keep his promises about the land. So the restoration, therefore, becomes this act of spectacular vindication. God is magnifying his own great name, proving his unique deity and holiness to a skeptical, watching world.
That reframes everything. It's an act of divine self-justification, showing his power and faithfulness, regardless of Israel's track record. So how does this reputation-saving act actually work? What are the practical promises that come with that restoration to the land?
This is where we get the core elements of the new covenant, which was promised earlier in Jeremiah 31 and is now really fleshed out here. Our source material points to 3 specific interwoven elements that define this ultimate restoration.
Okay, what's the first one?
First, restoration to the land. That's Ezekiel 36.24. They are definitively gathered from all the countries where they were scattered and brought back into their own territory.
Physical return. Got it.
Second, forgiveness of sin and purification. This is in verse 25. It's described symbolically, but so powerfully. "I will sprinkle you with pure water, and you will be clean from all your impurities."
That's justification. A clean slate.
A total removal of their defilement. And third, and this is the absolutely necessary element, the indwelling presence of the Holy Spirit, verses 26 and 27. This is the mechanism for sustained faithfulness. God promises to give them a new heart, one of flesh, responsive and sensitive, instead of that hard heart of stone, and a new spirit.
So the new heart and the new spirit, they aren't just a general spiritual pick-me-up. They're the actual solution to Israel's historical problem of unfaithfulness.
Yes.
It's like God is changing their internal programming to enable them to be obedient.
That's a perfect way to put it. Under the Old Covenant, the law was external, written on stone, and the people were internally flawed. They just lacked the will and the capacity to keep it.
But in the new covenant,
God initiates the transformation. He says, "I will put my spirit within you and cause you to walk in my statutes." It's the divine initiative that makes their obedience possible, ensuring the covenant will never be broken again.
and that internal change leads directly to the visible external outcome that we see in the final verses. The result is a total transformation, both moral and physical.
Exactly. On the moral front, the people will finally remember their past evil behavior and feel genuinely ashamed and embarrassed by their sins. That's a sign of deep national repentance that flows from the spiritual regeneration.
And the land itself is transformed.
Completely. It goes from desolate ruins to becoming productive and beautiful, like the Garden of Eden. The cities will be rebuilt and fortified, and this causes the surrounding nations to witness the process and know that I, the Lord, have rebuilt the ruins and replanted what was desolate.
That sense of simultaneous physical and spiritual fulfillment is so important here. The sources are really careful to note that the current state of Israel, while it's a remarkable physical regathering, doesn't yet fulfill these promises.
Right, because that fundamental spiritual cleansing and regeneration hasn't taken place on a universal scale.
That's the critical takeaway from chapter 36. The physical restoration depends on and happens at the same time as the spiritual component.
Yes. When God acts for his name's sake, he will do it completely. The future cleansing, the return, and the land's miraculous fruitfulness, it all points to a massive, singular, future national conversion that validates the entire process for every nation that's watching.
So chapter 36 gave us the theological and geographical blueprint for restoration. Chapter 37 gives us the spiritual and national drama.
It really does.
We move into what is maybe the most famous and certainly the most intensely symbolic vision in this entire section, the Valley of Dry Bones.
It's a stunning visual metaphor. It just captures the ultimate despair of exile. Ezekiel is physically placed in a valley full of scattered bones that are described as very dry.
Which signifies total death.
Total political and spiritual death of the nation. The people themselves had lost all hope. They're quoted as saying, "Our bones are dry, our hope has perished, we are cut off, its hopelessness distilled."
And the vision of resurrection, it happens in two distinct stages, which, if you read it quickly, you might overlook. But the distinction is so crucial for understanding the prophetic promise. How does God start to reverse this death sentence?
The first stage is purely mechanical and physical. Ezekiel is told to prophesy, and suddenly there's this terrible rattling sound. The bones come together, forming skeletons, then bodies, tendons, muscles, skin covering them. But, and this is crucial, the text emphasizes there is still no breath in them.
So they're just corpses.
Perfect corpses. They look ready, but they are still politically and spiritually lifeless.
So they have the physical body of a nation, the land, the population, the structure, but they lack the animating principle. They aren't alive yet.
Precisely.
Eh.
That requires the second stage, which connects directly back to chapter 36's promise of the Spirit. Ezekiel has to prophesy again, but this time to the breath, the Spirit or the wind, to come from the four winds and breathe life into these corpses. Only then do they live and stand up, not as scattered individuals, but as a unified, organized, powerful entity, an extremely great army.
And that distinction between the physical assembly, the return to the land, and the spiritual animation receiving the Spirit, that's the key link between the two chapters.
It is. It proves that the restoration requires both elements to be what God considers complete.
And we have to stress the significance that Ezekiel himself provides. This is a vision of national resurrection.
Yes, very important. It's about the political and spiritual rebirth of the entire nation-state. The scattered people will be brought up out of their metaphorical graves, meaning the places where they were dispersed, and returned to the land, physically and spiritually restored.
And the source material is very explicit that this vision does not deal with the general doctrine of personal bodily resurrection for all individuals.
No, it's strictly about the corporate rebirth of the nation of Israel.
And the standing up of that great army flows perfectly into the second major theme of chapter 37, the reunion of the kingdoms.
Yes. For centuries, the nation had been split in two after Solomon. You had the northern kingdom of Israel, or Ephraim, and the southern kingdom of Judah. And that division was a constant source of strife and war.
It was one of the greatest failures of the nation.
Absolutely. So to symbolize its permanent resolution, Ezekiel performs another symbolic act, the joining of the two sticks.
Walk us through the symbolism of those objects again.
Okay, so Ezekiel is commanded to take two distinct sticks. One represents the existing remnant, Judah and the Israelites associated with him. This is the southern post-exilic branch.
Okay.
The second stick represents the historical northern kingdom. Joseph, specifically the leading tribe of Ephraim, and all the house of Israel associated with him. This represents the lost northern tribes that were scattered centuries before.
And he joins them together.
He has to join them so they literally become one single stick in his hand.
That's such a dramatic visual. It guarantees that the civil war, the political schism, is permanently over.
Yeah.
So what is the eternal outcome that's promised to this newly unified nation?
God vows to gather them from the nations, make them one nation in the land on the mountains of Israel, and they will be ruled by one king.
And this king is definitively identified as my servant David.
Yes, which the sources confirm refers to the Messiah, the son of David, who will reign universally over them.
And this covenant of peace, it's not temporary, it is permanent and singular.
Absolutely not temporary. They will never again be two nations or divided into two separate competing kingdoms. A perpetual covenant of peace is established. The sanctuary is placed among them forever, and the nations will know that the Lord sanctifies Israel.
And this results in three unbreakable realities.
Yes. A new commitment to God's will, enabled by the Spirit, permanent eternal occupation of their hereditary homeland, and the eternal rule of the Messiah, David's heir.
So if we look at the current political reality of the modern state of Israel, which has certainly seen a physical regathering, the evidence suggests that this final messianic fulfillment hasn't happened. The spiritual engine of the new covenant is still future.
It is entirely future. The promise to Abraham was unconditional, and it included a geographical inheritance in the land of Canaan. For that ultimate covenant of peace to be fulfilled, the land has to be the physical focus, and the people have to experience that deep, national, spiritual regeneration when they return. The dry bones must not only get their flesh back, but also receive the breath.
Okay, so the moment the nation is restored, unified, spiritually regenerated, and living securely, the narrative takes this massive, unexpected turn in chapter 38.
A huge turn.
We go instantly from the tranquility of reunion to apocalyptic global conflict, the great end-time invasion led by Gog, of the land of Magog.
It is one of the most vividly detailed end times battles described anywhere in prophecy, and it's set deliberately against a newly restored Israel, which highlights that even when God fulfills his promises, it provokes a final, massive, external challenge.
Let's identify the key players and just the vast scale of this international alliance. The leader is Gog, identified as the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, who forms this massive coalition with him.
The coalition is designed to represent just overwhelming power drawn from the entire circumference of Israel's world. We need to pin down the geography of these ancient names.
Okay.
So you have Persia, which is to the northeast of Israel, modern Iran.
Right.
Ethiopia, or Kush, to the southwest. Put, often located to the southeast along the African coast, or maybe Libya.
So all around.
All around. You have Gomer, likely to the northwest, near the Taurus Mountains, or modern Turkey, and Beth Togarmah, also in the northern regions, southeast of the Black Sea.
This is a huge, geographically diverse, multi-continental coalition, a vast army, as the text calls it, summoned from the north, south, east, and west.
Yes. The sheer geographic diversity just underscores that this is not some regional skirmish. It's a global action intended to crush the newly reconstituted nation of Israel.
And the setting for this attack is so crucial. It happens in the latter years when Israel is back in the land, gathered from the nations and living securely. But what makes them such an attractive target for this massive assault?
The description of Israel is key. They are living quietly and securely in unwalled towns.
No defenses.
No defenses at all. They're relying on God's presence, not on physical fortifications, because that covenant of peace has been established. Gog sees this peace as vulnerability, as weakness.
So he devises an evil plan.
Right, and it's rooted purely in rapacious greed. He plans to invade and plunder, to carry away the wealth, silver, gold, cattle, and goods from these seemingly easy marks, the people who live at the center of the earth.
Gog sees a nation that is both wealthy and defenseless. But God uses that wicked intent for his own sovereign purpose, doesn't he?
Oh, absolutely. God is the primary mover here. He declares, I will turn you around, put hooks into your jaws, and he drags the entire massive army, almost against its will, to the mountains of Israel. Gog thinks he's executing his own plan, but in reality he's being compelled to participate in God's demonstration of holiness and power.
So God is using Gog as a tool to demonstrate his ultimate sovereignty. What happens when this massive coalition descends on the mountains of Israel? What's the divine response?
God responds with an unparalleled display of rage and fury. The sources note that the expressions used for divine anger here are unparalleled in the book,
Wow.
and the judgment is instantaneous, total, and it's multifaceted. First, a great earthquake shakes the entire region, causing mountains and cliffs to fall, and every man in the coalition panics.
Total chaos.
Total chaos. Second, God calls for a sword, but it's not Israel's sword. The allied forces turn violently on each other. Every man's sword will be against his brother. The alliance just annihilates itself. And then third, you have judgment by plague, bloodshed, and this terrifying combination of elemental forces. A torrential downpour, massive hailstones, fire, and brimstone.
So the armies are just utterly overthrown, and God magnifies himself through the annihilation of Gog. But the scale of the destruction is so immense that it requires this incredible detailed aftermath, a phase of logistical cleanup that is shocking in its scope. Let's talk about the divine feast that follows.
This is such a powerful reversal of roles, a demonstration of contempt for the enemies. The Lord turns the tables on traditional sacrifices. Ezekiel is told to prophesy not to the people, but to the birds and the wild beasts to gather for a great slaughter.
A sacrifice.
Yes, a vast, gruesome sacrifice, where the victims are the princes and warriors of the earth. The leaders who came to plunder become food for scavengers.
And then the burial effort itself. the requirement to cleanse the land. It's not just a quick matter of clearing the bodies.
No. The sheer number of the dead means they need a massive cemetery in the valley of Haman Gog, which literally translates to the multitude of Gog. The cemetery will be so vast it will actually obstruct the path of travelers.
And the text specifies how long it will take.
Yes, specifies that the burial crews and continual scouts will labor for 7 months to cleanse the land of all human remains.
7 months. Non-stop, dedicated labor just to purify the land from the bodies. The detail. The scouts having to mark bone fragments with a sign until the burial crew can arrive. It just shows the dedication to restoring ritual purity.
It speaks to the absolute holiness required in this restored state. No defilement can remain. And then you have the fuel provision, which demonstrates the sheer size of the weaponry the enemies brought.
The weaponry is repurposed entirely for civilian use.
For 7 years, the Israelites will use the enemy's numerous implements of warfare, shields, bows, arrows, war clubs, smears as fuel. They won't need to cut down any wood from their own forests.
So God is literally turning the plunderers into the plundered.
Exactly, providing spoils and sustainable energy for the restored nation for nearly a decade. 7 years of burning spears and shields. That's not just a cleanup, it's a decade of free energy supplied by the enemy. That puts the scale of this invasion into shocking perspective.
These timelines, 7 months of burial, 7 years of fuel, this is exactly why the timing of this invasion, relative to other end times prophecies like the 7-year tribulation and the 1,000-year millennium, is so difficult. Let's do a dedicated deep dive here.
Yeah.
The source lists 7 different professional views on exactly when this Gog-Magog battle happens.
Right. The complexity comes up because the specific logistical details clash with the conditions that are described elsewhere in prophecy. For example, one major view is that the invasion happens just before the millennium begins, maybe as part of the Battle of Armageddon. But that doesn't really fit the setting.
Why doesn't it fit Armageddon?
Well, the preconditions for Gog's attack are that Israel is living securely in unwalled towns, enjoying peace and wealth. The period leading up to Armageddon, especially the last half of the tribulation, is described everywhere else as a time of unparalleled persecution and intense siege, not security, and unwalled villages.
Right. And then you have the logistical challenge of the aftermath. Some suggest it happens during the tribulation itself. But placing a 7-month cleanup and a 7-year burning period during a time when Israel is under intense global persecution just seems completely impractical. Who is doing the cleanup and burning when the nation is just trying to survive?
Exactly. Other views push the battle much later to the end of the millennium, based on Revelation 20. But if it happens at the end of the millennium, why would the inhabitants burn weapons for 7 years right before God creates a new heaven and a new earth where there is no more war? It makes the 7-year fuel provision kind of redundant.
So if the specific non-negotiable details of Ezekiel, the 7 months, the 7 years, the secure population, if they don't fit cleanly into one single timing period, what's the most comprehensive synthesis that our sources present?
Well, the most compelling interpretation, the one that allows us to honor all the detailed logistics Ezekiel provides, is the combined view. The source suggests this might be another instance where the prophet sees 2 events that are widely separated by over 1,000 years as a single prophetic unit.
Like how prophets sometimes spoke of the first and second comings of the Messiah as one event, without recognizing the thousands of years separating them.
Precisely. The fulfillment could potentially be dual-phased. A first phase corresponding to the massive destruction of God's enemies at the end of the tribulation, a battle that certainly sets the stage for the millennium.
And a second phase.
And then a second, final phase at the end of the millennium, as described in Revelation 20, when a final global rebellion is crushed. The descriptions merge because the purpose is the same.
The purpose being the ultimate and final demonstration of God's holiness and sovereignty to the nations, making sure that Israel and the nations will know that he is the Lord, the Holy One.
Yes, it's God's final public declaration of his identity.
The narrative then shifts instantly and dramatically from global war and mass burial to a divine architectural tour.
It's a huge shift.
Chapters 40 through 46, 9 full chapters, are dedicated to the vision of a future temple. This isn't abstract prophecy anymore. This is detailed blueprint prophecy.
And this vision is received on a very specific date, April 19th, 573 BC, the 25th year of their exile. Ezekiel is placed by God's Spirit on a very high mountain in Israel, and he sees a structure that is so massive it looks like a city from where he's standing.
And he's immediately given a specific non-human guide for this tour.
Yes, a being whose appearance is like bronze, symbolizing durability and strength. This guide carries 2 distinct instruments, a linen cord for measuring long distances, and a measuring stick or rod for shorter, precise measurements.
And the guide's instruction to Ezekiel is the mandate for this whole section. Watch closely, listen carefully, and pay attention to everything I show you. The importance is in the staggering level of architectural and logistical detail.
It really is.
But why so much detail? Why dedicate 9 chapters to measurements and regulations?
There are profound reasons. First, the sanctuary is the visible, physical symbol of God's presence on earth. The judgment began when God's glory departed from Solomon's temple back in chapter 10.
Right.
So the restoration has to climax when his glory re-enters the new temple in chapter 43. Second, this new temple is the visible, functioning center of worship for the new covenant people. Just as God gave minute plans for the tabernacle to go with the Mosaic covenant, he provides these plans for the ultimate covenant of peace.
And the sheer size, the geometry, it might require a massive shift in the physical land itself.
It absolutely does. The total complex is far too large to fit on the existing footprint of the historical Temple Mount in Jerusalem. The entire architectural scheme, especially the location of the sacred district, implies a great change in the topography of the land, which other prophets, like Zechariah, confirm will happen in the end times. The mountains will be leveled, the land will be adjusted to accommodate this divine structure.
And the ultimate sign of this restoration happens early in the tour, the return of glory.
The guide leads Ezekiel to the east gate, and there the glory of the God of Israel described with a sound like rushing water, with the earth radiating his glory, returns to the temple.
From the exact direction it had departed.
The exact direction it had departed when the Babylonians destroyed Jerusalem. It is the moment God keeps his promise of permanent residency.
And the moment the glory enters the temple, a dramatic, permanent command is issued about that specific entrance.
Yes, the east gate of the inner court is shut, and the Lord declares it will not be opened, and no one will enter by it. And the reason is because the Lord, the God of Israel, has entered by it. Its sealed condition guarantees the covenant. God has entered, and he will never depart again. It's a permanent seal on his promise.
Let's discuss worship. We have these incredibly specific measurements for the tiered altar of sacrifice. But this restored kingdom is ruled by the Messiah, whose sacrifice on the cross was sufficient and ultimate.
Yeah.
So if Christ has already provided the ultimate sacrifice, what is the purpose of sacrifices in this millennial temple? Why go back to animals?
This is a critical theological hurdle that needs careful distinction. If they were efficacious, meaning they actually cleansed or saved, they would contradict the New Testament truth that Christ's sacrifice was once for all.
It would make no sense.
It wouldn't. Our sources specify that the burnt offerings, sin offerings, and peace offerings performed here are memorials. They are entirely retrospective.
What does retrospective mean in this context? Are we saying they're like physical, historical exhibits, reminding them visually and ritually of the price the Messiah paid?
That's a great way to put it. They function much like the Lord's Supper does for believers today. They don't save you or cleanse sin, but rather they look back to the finished, all-sufficient sacrifice of Jesus Christ.
So the Old Testament sacrifices pointed forward to the cross.
And these millennial sacrifices point backward to the cross, serving as an ever-present, visible reminder of the ultimate covenant of peace established through the Messiah's blood.
That makes the continuation of sacrifice an act of remembrance and obedience, not a means of atonement. Now, the personnel who staff this temple are treated very differently based on their family lineage and their history of faithfulness. This is the priestly distinction in chapter 44.
And it is a stunning example of how consequences carry over into the restored kingdom, reinforcing that holiness demands faithfulness. The Lord establishes 2 clear groups among the Levitical family.
Okay, first the Zadokite priests.
These are the descendants of Zadok who were uniquely faithful. They kept the charge of the sanctuary when the rest of Israel, including other Levites, went astray into idolatry. Their reward for this loyalty is unparalleled access. They approach the Lord directly to minister, enter the sanctuary, and handle the most holy things.
And they keep their teaching role.
Yes, a vital judicial and teaching role. They teach the people the difference between the holy and the common, and how to distinguish between clean and unclean.
And then the other Levites, the ones who went astray, the group that followed idols.
They are restricted. They have to bear the shame of their abominable deeds. Their service is permanently limited to maintenance and subsidiary roles, overseeing gates, serving in the outer precincts, slaughtering sacrifices.
But they can't approach the Lord.
Crucially, they cannot approach the Lord to serve as priests or handle what is most sacred. It is a permanent restriction based on their historical unfaithfulness.
Hmm.
They are Levites, but they are not fully reinstated priests.
That distinction is a powerful lesson in covenant fidelity. The choices made centuries ago dictate their role in the ultimate future kingdom. The vision also gives these extremely detailed, almost mundane rules for the Zadokite priests about their dress and appearance.
Even clothing is a matter of holiness. They have to wear linen garments when they minister, specifically avoiding wool, which causes sweat. Sweat is seen as defiling or common. They can't shave their heads, but they also can't let their hair grow long. They have restrictions on who they can marry.
And their inheritance?
Their sole inheritance is the Lord. They are given no physical property in the land allotment, unlike the other tribes, ensuring their complete dedication to the sanctuary.
Before we move on to the land division, we have to clarify the identity of the prince, the Nasi, who features so prominently in the worship regulations. He sits in the closed east gate porch to eat a sacrificial meal. He provides offerings for the feasts. The sources are extremely insistent he is not the Messiah. That seems like a huge caveat. If the Messiah is ruling, why is there a need for a flawed, mortal administrative layer right beneath him?
This is a vital distinction that is often confused because the prince is given great authority. However, he is absolutely not Jesus Christ Messiah, and our source details 3 crucial reasons based on the text itself.
Okay, what are they?
1, he must present a sin offering for himself. That's Ezekiel 45.22. This is logically impossible for a perfect, sinless Messiah.
Right.
2, he will produce natural children, according to Ezekiel 46.10. And 3, he's not a priest. His function is administrative. Jesus Christ will fill that ultimate king-priest role.
So the prince is an elevated human ruler Messiah's administrative delegate. He holds an intermediate status between the fully consecrated priests and the general population.
Correct. And chapter 45 drives home the expectation for all future leaders, including the prince, to govern with absolute integrity. They must stop violence and oppression and use just balances, a just dry measure and a just liquid measure. Justice and economic fairness are foundational requirements for this restored state.
Moving to the final 2 chapters, the vision expands from the temple complex to the entire geography of Israel, starting with one of the most famous and miraculous physical changes, the river of life. This single feature, flowing from the sanctuary, revitalizes everything it touches.
This is such a beautiful image of divine, inexhaustible revitalization. The prophet sees water starting as a trickle, flowing from under the threshold of the temple toward the east, trickling out from the south side of the altar. This one small source starts a river that transforms the entire arid rift valley.
And the guide measures the water flow repeatedly, showing its miraculous exponential growth.
He does. The guide measures 1,750 feet, and the water is ankle deep. Another 1,750 feet, it's knee deep. Another 1,750 feet, it's waist deep. And after the final 1,750 feet, a total of just over 1.25 miles, it becomes an uncrossable river, deep enough to swim in.
It doubles in depth every step of the way.
Yes, starting as a stream and ending as a massive river less than 1.5 miles later.
Where does this self-sustaining divine river end up, and what is the profound visible impact of its destination?
It flows down into the Rift Valley, and most remarkably, it enters the Dead Sea.
Which today is the ultimate symbol of stagnation, death, barrenness.
The saltiest body of water on Earth, the river water flows in, making the salty, stagnant waters entirely fresh. The text promises that everything will live where the river flows. This is God explicitly changing the unchangeable, physically reversing a curse of nature.
So what does this new, magically productive ecosystem look like in detail?
It becomes a thriving environment. The Jordan Valley, which today is largely desolate, will be teeming. Fishermen will spread nets all the way from En-Gedi to En-Eglaim, catching very many kinds of fish, like the fish of the Great Sea.
But there's a small exception.
Interestingly, yes, the text says the swamps and marshes near the sea will remain salty. This is perhaps a practical provision, allowing the people to still harvest salt and other minerals necessary for daily life.
And the plant life is equally miraculous, showing perpetual renewal.
Trees will grow on both banks, remaining continually healthy and incredibly productive. They will bear fruit every month because their water source flows perpetually and eternally from the sanctuary. Their fruit is for food, and their leaves are for healing, a perfect, self-sustaining ecosystem that restores what was once desert and desolation.
This geographical transformation leads us to the final necessary act of restoration, the creation of the holy city and the equitable division of the land.
Yes. The land is divided amongst the 12 tribes of Israel. Joseph receives two portions, one for Ephraim and one for Manasseh, to ensure there are 12 administrative units in the kingdom. The key feature here is how revolutionary the division is.
It's not based on historical boundaries.
No, it's not based on complex history or political clout, but into straight, standardized strips running uniformly from east to west. This ensures fairness and ends all the old, complicated tribal borders and disputes. Dan is in the far north, Gad is in the far south.
And the new capital, the central holy allotment, is reserved right in the middle, between Judah and Benjamin, symbolizing its centrality and unity. What are the revolutionary dimensions of this sacred district?
The central area is immense, 8.3 miles long by 3.3 miles wide. This is the holy allotment, reserved solely for sacred and administrative purposes. It contains three main distinct components.
Okay.
One, the sanctuary and priestly land for the Zadokite priests with the temple and its green belt. Two, the Levites' land for the non-Zadokite Levites. And three, the city land, which is the portion for Jerusalem itself for common use by the city, allowing all Israelites access to the capital.
And the city of Jerusalem itself, nestled in this allotment, is a geometrical masterpiece, a complete departure from the messy, winding streets of Old Jerusalem.
It's described as a perfect square, 1.5 miles on each side, with a perimeter of 6 miles. The design itself, being a perfect grid, symbolizes the perfect order and justice of the restored administration. And the organization of the gates reinforces that national unity promised back in chapter 37.
How are the 12 gates of the city arranged to signify that complete unity?
There are 3 gates on each of the 4 sides, and each gate is named after one of the 12 tribes of Israel. The north side has gates for Reuben, Judah, and Levi. The east side, Joseph, Benjamin, and Dan south, Simeon, Issachar, and Zebulun. And the west, Gad, Asher, and Naphtali.
So all the tribes are permanently represented.
This historical north and south, permanently represented, confirming the unification under the Messianic king.
And finally, the ultimate name change for the city, which summarizes the entire prophetic vision and provides the perfect conclusion to Ezekiel's mandate.
From that day forward, the name of the city will be, "The Lord is there." Yahweh Shammah.
Wow.
It confirms the purpose of the millennial temple, the closed east gate, and the entire restoration. God's permanent, visible, and glorious dwelling place is now among his perfectly restored, obedient people. #tag outro.
This has truly been a deep dive into an astonishingly detailed prophetic map. We started with a broken, scattered nation that had defiled the land, and we ended with a geographically and spiritually perfect kingdom centered around a visible, functioning sanctuary.
It's incredible.
This deep dive really demonstrates how incredibly minute this future vision is. From the fate of a long-dead sea to the daily clothing of a specific group of priests. It's comprehensive, orderly, and absolute.
And what's so fascinating here is the sheer physicality of the promise and how much importance is placed on the literal land. The covenant of peace isn't just a spiritual or theological idea.
No.
It has exact dimensions, specific borders, a functioning altar that memorializes Christ's work, and an administrative prince who has to govern justly. It confirms that the ancient geographical and physical promises made to Abraham and Jacob were unconditional and will find a concrete, literal fulfillment on the earth. The entire restoration is an act of divine necessity, vindicating God's name before all the watching nations.
And that total transformation hinges entirely on the fulfillment of chapter 36 and 43. The Lord's physical return to the temple from the east gate and the outpouring of the Spirit on the house of Israel, leading to that mass spiritual regeneration.
Which brings us to the present. Given that the current state of Israel's population is largely not spiritually regenerated and the Dead Sea remains defiantly salty, this raises a really important question for you to ponder.
Uh-oh.
If the implementation of this detailed plan, with its perfect geometry and miraculous water source, is contingent upon God's visible return and the instantaneous spiritual rebirth of the nation, what great global event must precede the start of this final age? And what specific sign, whether it's geographical, political, or spiritual, should we watch for to indicate that this final, complete, and detailed restoration is truly beginning?